I'm going to talk to you about hybrid IT with AWS and really how you can leverage it to your advantage as a customer. So what we're going to cover this afternoon. So first of all, I'm going to give a quick definition around what I think hybrid IT looks like today and also kind of what it looked like in the past. We're going to talk a little around how customers are actually using AWS in their hybrid IT workloads and how you can start getting started with hybrid IT. I'm also going to cover off some of the integration and operations considerations that you should have when embarking on your hybrid IT journey and give you a couple of kind of next steps to take away from this session. So, first question, really, what is hybrid IT? Well, when I started planning out this session, I took a step back and I thought about the time before I joined Amazon about 4 years ago. And at that time, we were talking about hybrid IT. But was it hype or reality then? Now, if I think back to 4 years ago, back in 2012, I think it was probably hype. I also kind of fished around for a definition from 2012 for hybrid IT, and I came up with this one, which is actually attributed to Gartner. It was quite an interesting definition. It kind of aligned towards the NIST definition of hybrid cloud, but there was one thing within this that really took my attention, and that was that hybrid IT was in support of a business outcome. And I think this is a really important concept to grasp. Hybrid IT is not just for IT's sake, it should be to support the business. Fast forward to 2016. What is the reality? Well, the reality is that, you know what? Hybrid IT is all about running existing corporate IT systems alongside those which are in cloud and gradually transforming over time. But again, this should really be supporting a business outcome. So these are important things to consider. But you know what? Some people say it's not for me. Some people feel that there are real adoption barriers. Well, I would kind of question that. But, people may have existing capital investments that make them think, cloud's not just for me quite yet. Or they might be tied into, draconian ISV licensing, which makes it hard to license on cloud versus licensing on-premise. Well, if you're in that situation, you might want to take a look at the EC2 dedicated host option. That can help you. Or you might have non-x86 systems. Now, these are going to take a little bit more effort because ultimately you are going to have to re-platform or re-architect. And all of these things combined make it really hard sometimes to figure out what your ROI is. But remember, hybrid IT isn't just about taking what you've done in the past and moving it to cloud. It should be about doing something new. It should be about supporting a real business outcome. So, how are some of our other customers, how have they made that transition and that journey to hybrid IT? There's a couple of different use cases. The first kind of really common use case I come across is one that was kind of pioneered by Expedia, who's been using the platform for many, many years. When they got started with development and test. And running development and test on cloud is incredibly compelling. It can really help you accelerate your app development. You can actually leverage AWS platform services such as Elastic Beanstalk or OpsWorks to be able to allow your developers to focus on applications. Okay? They can have environments in minutes. There's no dependencies on infrastructure teams having to build these out for them, even at an AWS level. It's something that they can be given control of. One of the other really great things about running development and test on cloud as a hybrid workload is that you can test at scale. You can test with production configuration. And I'm just talking about data. I'm talking about infrastructure. No longer are you tied to single servers with no load balancers trying to reproduce a problem on production, which is radically different. You can actually run that entire infrastructure in test. You can have as many copies of that as you want. And you can also automate and have environments available on demand. But the real beauty of hybrid IT and development and test is it's really pay for what you use. And when you don't want to be doing testing or you don't want to do development, maybe because you're going to go home, you can just turn it off. Okay? Maybe you're going to store it for a little longer. Fine. Archive a copy of that environment, rehydrate it when you need it. So dev test, hybrid IT, a really good workload to get started. However, for some customers, they want to address a business challenge. So for Pfizer, they actually started hybrid IT for large-scale compute grids. And this is a really common use case for a lot of companies because it typically allows them to think bigger. Imagine the situation where you're no longer constrained by your on-premise infrastructure. Suddenly, you can dynamically add capacity when you need it. You can scale to tens of thousands of cores of compute in minutes. Okay? And if you leverage Amazon S3 and Amazon DynamoDB, I mean, you end up with fairly limitless storage and a high-performance and a high-performance NoSQL solution to go along with that. The other beauty of running large-scale compute grids is that you can do it all within a secure environment inside AWS. You can leverage the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud to deploy your instances. And across our storage services, we support encryption at rest, so you can always be happy in the knowledge that your data is encrypted. But again, similar to dev test, this is pay for what you use. How long do you need those 10,000 or 20,000 cores for? You might only need it for 2 or 3 hours, and when you're done with it, simply turn it off again. By the way, if this is something that is interesting to you, I strongly encourage you to go and have a look at the EC2 Spot Fleet offering. It's a great service because it allows you to specify the number of cores you want across a range of different instance types within a single region, and Spot Fleet takes care of trying to provision those for you. Perhaps you're not actually thinking about compute grids. Perhaps you're thinking about something radically new altogether. And perhaps you're thinking about new product development. And this is something that Philips did. Philips built out their digital health suite platform on top of AWS. It allowed them to think the impossible. And you can do this as well. Because suddenly you don't have the constraints that you had in the old world. It's now possible for you to go out there and say, you know what? I want to test something. I want to experiment. This means that you can develop new products faster. And you can make use of the latest technologies. You're no longer constrained by what do I have available today. And because we experiment and because we make mistakes, we learn. But we can be agile with hybrid IT now. We can actually go, you know what? That didn't quite work. Let me try something different. If you're making use of a managed service from AWS, it's very quick for you to say, I don't want that anymore. Terminate it, let's try something else. And you can do that within a matter of minutes. This allows you to embrace new technologies very, very quickly. But ultimately, what are we trying to achieve with this? Well, we're trying to deliver new value. Okay? We're trying to grow new lines of business to keep ourselves relevant in the market. But ultimately, we're trying to deliver real business outcome. Now, some customers have decided to go the whole hog. Some customers talk about data center consolidation. Now, GE talks last year, our reInvent session in Las Vegas, about how they were consolidating 34 of their global data centers down to 4 and putting a significant majority of their workloads to AWS. Now, why do companies do this? Well, for some, it's about cost reduction. Because if they can consolidate and they can simplify their cost structures, it can bring real benefit for their businesses. If you can start to leverage AWS managed services on top of that, it can be even better because I can start to reduce my operational costs as well. But ultimately, the reason that companies start to do this is because they want to be dynamic. They want to be able to respond to the changing needs of their business, to the changing demands, and being able to deploy globally on demand at any time. Remember, once you have an Amazon account, you can deploy anywhere within the world that Amazon has a region in just a few minutes. And it's incredibly compelling for businesses that they no longer have to go out and have lengthy negotiations on data centers. But again, why are we doing this? Well, because we should be focusing on what we're good at. We should be focusing on our core business. Because ultimately, you need to be spending time on what differentiates your business, your company. Okay? And focus on then delivering the business outcomes for your business. Well, this is all great. But how do I get started? Well, actually, I think from my perspective, the pattern is quite similar for most companies. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to build out a hybrid environment. Next, they'll deploy some base services to make sure that it links in with their corporate infrastructure. And then they'll start on selecting a couple of projects to jumpstart. So let's have a look at the first step. So if I look to build a hybrid environment, what does it look like? Well, in most cases, it's typically connecting your corporate data center with the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. And you can do this either using an IPsec VPN, or you might prefer to use our Direct Connect service, which gives you a dedicated bandwidth into the platform. Well, what is VPC, or Virtual Private Cloud? Well, this allows you to extend your data center into the AWS cloud. Okay? You get to define and create a logical section of the AWS cloud where you actually specify the network address space. We give you complete control over the virtual networking infrastructure that's inside of that virtual private cloud environment. So you get to define the connectivity types that you need. Okay? You get to define whether or not you want to have VPN connectivity, you want to have internet connectivity, maybe you want to have connectivity between different VPCs, even in different AWS accounts with different customers. All these things are possible and within your control. You also manage the security configuration. We give you full control over things like the security groups, which are our stateful firewalls, which operate at an instance level. And we give you visibility into the traffic inside your VPC. So you can actually see which packets are being accepted, which packets are being dropped between instances. Well, that sounds pretty interesting. But what does that mean in practice? Well, why don't we take an example? Why don't we build a virtual private cloud? Let's start off with a scenario. So my scenario is that I have an existing data center today. It's an on-premises data center. It has a corporate IP address range, and I have a VPN. Okay? On the Amazon side, what we're going to need to do is we're going to build a VPC, a virtual private cloud. Now, I'm going to be allocating this some address space for my corporate network range, but I'm going to divide it into two. And there's a good reason for this. That's because when you deploy inside AWS, we give you the ability within a region to select from multiple availability zones. And if you think about multiple availability zones as logical data centers, we're giving you the ability, in this example, to deploy into two separate logical data centers. Now, these are physically separated. So once I start thinking about deploying resources, I'm actually deploying resources into two completely separate data centers. We're also going to have to link these up. We're going to link them up using a VPN. I'm going to actually choose a dynamic VPN. I'll be doing route exchange via BGP, just to keep things simple. So let's take a look at how to build that. Let's head over. So demo time, guys. If you can switch me over. Awesome, thank you. So good news, bad news. Good news, okay? You guys must be awesome because you've come to the 200 level track. The bad news is you're going to have to see a lot of blue screens with white writing for a while. Actually, I wanted to give you a taste of how you can actually operate with AWS, not just using the web console, but also actually using the command line as well. So everything I'm going to show you here, you can absolutely do through the web console, but I want to just show you how easy it is to interact with us even through command line. So we want to create a VPC. So I just need to type the command to tell me how to create a VPC. So I just pull up the help. I'm just looking for the mandatory information right now, which is a CIDR block. So to create a VPC, I just need to specify the CIDR block. Not a problem. I saw that a minute ago on my previous slide. So I type that. So this will now go away and create inside AWS a virtual private cloud environment. So right now all I've done is I've set up the virtual networking construct. I haven't actually created anything that I can deploy into. So I need to create a couple of subnets. So the first one will be in availability zone 1A. So I've just specified this will be in Singapore. Okay, let's give that a moment. And you'll notice I've specified a sub-address range of the overall VPC CIDR block. I want to create a second one, so I just run the same command again. Sorry guys, it's a bit boring, I know. But this time I'm actually going to specify the other availability zone. Wait for that to come back. So what I've now done is I've created those two logical data centers inside Amazon. Okay, well, I need to have some connectivity into this, so I actually need to create a VPN gateway. So I'm just going to create a VPN gateway. But remember, I told you, we give you control over these constructs. So even though I've created a VPN gateway, I've not actually attached it to anything right now. It just kind of exists there in the ether. So I need to attach it to my VPN, to my VPC. Okay, just type the VGW VPC. This will now take that VPN gateway and it's slotting it in to the VPN, to the VPC. Okay, I'm nearly ready to create my VPN, but before I do, I actually need to specify the IP address, the peer address of the VPN on-premise. So let me just create what we call a customer gateway. Okay, so IPsec again, I specify the public IP, and I specify that this will be using BGP. So, okay, so I now have all the pieces in place that I need to create a VPN. Great, let's create the VPN. So this is literally a combination of the customer gateway, the VGW, and that should then create me a VPN connection. So the VPN is now creating now, so it'll take a few moments, so I'm just going to fill a little bit. But there's a couple of pieces of information that have been returned here. This is essentially all of the parameters that I need to take into my VPN configuration on my VPN router. So for example, if I can see my actual mouse anywhere, yeah, there it is. That's the pre-shared key that exists between these two devices. Okay, so let's just take a quick look and see how the creation's going. Okay, so it looks like it's created, but the connection is down. Well, that's not surprising. I haven't configured anything on the other end. Okay, so I kind of promised I wasn't going to use the console, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to because I'm feeling a bit lazy. So I'm just going to flip to the console because the easiest way to actually obtain the configuration for your VPN is to get it from the console. You simply come in here, you select the VPN endpoint, and you say download configuration. What that then does is it gives you the ability to select from a range of different VPN platform providers to get a config file. Now, for me today, on the other end, I actually have a Cisco router. So I'm just going to download this. Okay, so it's a bit small, guys. I know you can't see that. So I've now actually downloaded the configuration for this router. So let me just copy that. Okay, so I'm now going to go and connect to my router. So as I said, it's a Cisco, so enable, type my password, into configuration mode, and now it really is as easy for me as going paste. So this now allows me to configure my router just by pasting a configuration file that I downloaded from the Amazon console. Now, to be fair, my router is completely blank, so I don't have any other tunnels on there that I need to worry about, but you can simply take that configuration and modify it to your needs. So let's check on the status of the VPN. Let's just look at the crypto setup. Okay, so it actually says that it's active, which is a good thing. Let's go and check on the other end in the actual VPC. How are we doing? Okay, good news. It's now up and running. And I've also received some routes via BGP. So let's go and check on our routing table. So, something odd here. I actually only have one route, and that's the IP address range that I've assigned to my VPC. So the same as when we create gateways, we don't automatically propagate routes. I have to actually turn on route propagation as well. Luckily, that's a fairly simple command. Okay, so this now will propagate routes from my VPN gateway into my VPC. So let's now check on the route again, and we should, if we're lucky, see the propagated route. So I now see that this has been propagated from my on-premise network via the VGW. And it's really that simple to get started. I've now created essentially 2 logical data centers. And I did that within about, 5 minutes? It's really that quick and simple to get started. Okay, can we switch back to the slides, please, guys? Thank you very much. So I've done that, and that's great, but I haven't got anything there. Okay, I've got connectivity. Now I need to be thinking about the base services. So, for my base services, I want to add a few more features to the network. I actually want to deploy a managed NAT gateway that's going to give me access to the internet and to the AWS APIs. In addition, I'd like to deploy some directory services. I'm going to actually choose to deploy the managed Microsoft Active Directory service that we now offer. And just to kind of spice things up a bit, I thought instead of showing you more command line entry, I'm going to do it using infrastructure as code. And I'm going to use the AWS CloudFormation service for that. Let's talk quickly about the two new services, though, that we've introduced. The first is the managed Microsoft Active Directory. So this is fully managed, okay? It comes with an SLA, and we take care of the deployment and management of the environment. Now, we will, by default, deploy it into 2 subnets, because we want to make sure this is highly available. Because it is a proper Microsoft Active Directory, we support external trust to other domains. And of course, you can run all of your Microsoft workloads against this directory. It also means that you can use your familiar Active Directory management tools. You're not tied into an Amazon-specific console for this. But there's also some really cool stuff that you get. So you get the ability to automatically join EC2 instances that you launch into this domain. It just happens in the background. There's no sysprept images with passwords embedded. This is all handled as part of the instance launch on the Amazon side. We also support federation and single sign-on to the AWS console when you have a managed AD server as well. I mean, you don't have to deploy a separate ADFS server. That's just something that we take care of for you. The next service that we touched on was CloudFormation, which is essentially our infrastructure as code service. I mean, this allows you to easily create and manage AWS resources. Those resources might be an EC2 instance. They might be an EBS volume. That might be an RDS database. You can group these together into a single template and deploy them in an orderly and predictable fashion. Now, the way that we describe these is actually using JSON notation. It's a text file. And if it's a text file, I can version it. Okay? Why don't we take a quick look at what this looks like? So this is a CloudFormation template or snippet of a template for my Microsoft AD. Looks pretty simple and it's pretty readable. I've got some properties in there. I'm going to have to specify an AD domain name. I'm going to have to specify a password, NetBIOS short name, plus the subnets that I want to deploy into. It's really this simple to use CloudFormation. So let's head back over to the console and take a look at how to do that. So guys, can you flip me back, please, to my screen? That'd be awesome. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing that I actually want to do is I want to deploy those additional networking components. And I'm going to do that by calling a stack that I pre-created. So this is just a file that contains all of the definitions. And I'm going to pass in a parameter, a single parameter, which is actually the VPC identifier. Okay, so that stack is now being completed. So let me just quickly check on the status of that. So I just need to specify the stack name that I just gave it. Okay, so that is now being created. So I now have to fill for a few more moments, and hopefully if I go back to it now, those components have been created. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, it's now created my stack for me. Now, actually, inside of that are 6 separate components. I only called one command to launch CloudFormation, which is one template. So it's incredibly powerful what you can do. Now I need to deploy the managed AD. You saw the template snippet already. So I'm going to call that template snippet, but instead of specifying all of those parameters on the command line, I'm going to actually use a parameter file. Okay. So, again, this is now deploying. Now, this will not complete in a few minutes. This will take about 10 minutes. We are dealing with a Windows instance under the hood here. So let me just check. Okay, so it's creating, it's in progress. But what you can see is you can see all of the parameters that I needed to create this stack. These were all pulled from the parameter file. So what I can now have is a template that defines the resources I want, and I can have a template for the parameters that I want to use. Interestingly, you can't see my password. That's because within my parameter file, I actually set it to be no echo, because I don't actually want to see that, which is great. Okay, guys, let's head back to the slides. Thank you. So CloudFormation is pretty cool. CloudFormation allows you to deploy things really quickly, really easily, and it's really repeatable. I mean, we should probably think about where else we could use that. Well, for me, one of the first logical places to use that is with a service catalog. Imagine this scenario. And this is a scenario I used to have all the time. I used to have my marketing team come to me and say, hey, Mark, we're running a marketing campaign. I need a microsite for 3 months. Do you have any spare infrastructure? Well, if they were lucky, I'd say, yes, no problem. If they were unlucky, it would be no. Guys, I need a PO. I need a cost center to book to, because I've got to go off and I've got to source and procure a bunch of infrastructure, and I've got to wait for it to be delivered and racked and stacked, and then the guys have got to install the OS and configure the operating system. And you know what? Weeks go by, months even sometimes, before that infrastructure is available for them to deploy their application on top of. Now let's think about it in a CloudFormation world. What you can do is you can integrate your service catalog with CloudFormation. I mean, I called it via command line. There's an API you can use as well. But essentially what you can do is you can say, once that request is approved, call CloudFormation and tell it to deploy a stack with parameters. You can actually have a whole environment in minutes. Not days, not weeks, not months, literally minutes. One of the best things for me, though, is that, you know what? When my marketing team is done with this environment, when they no longer require it, we can simply archive it and delete it and stop paying for it. I'm not left with infrastructure sitting idly in my data center anymore, waiting for the next time somebody comes to request something. And this is, for me, one of the things about hybrid IT that is incredibly powerful when you use something like CloudFormation. Some of the other considerations you should have, though. Well, for example, when you get started with hybrid IT, you start thinking about your operating model. And you need to think about how you're going to integrate AWS into your operating model. Now, the good news is we provide services on the platform that allow you to monitor what's going on. The AWS CloudWatch service actually allows you to see real-time metrics about the resources that you've deployed on top of AWS. What's also cool about it is you can actually bring your own metrics as well. You can actually say from your business applications, push metrics into CloudWatch. And you can now visualize not only IT metrics, but business metrics in one place. And this can be incredibly powerful because it now means that you can react to events that happen inside your application from a business perspective. Now, one of the very simple things that you can do is you can alert. You can actually create alarms against CloudWatch, and when metrics increase above a certain threshold or below a certain threshold, for example, you could send an alert. You could send that alert via, for example, the Amazon SNS service. It allows you to do push notifications. It allows you to do email. It even integrates with the Lambda service, if you've seen that today. But don't worry. Your current tools probably still work. I mean, there are a range of different tools out there, both open source and commercial, that have integration into AWS. Some of the open source ones have modules where you simply install them, and suddenly you can see all of your resources inside AWS. And it will pull metrics back from, for example, the CloudWatch service. For System Center, we actually wrote a plugin. So you can, if you run System Center today, you can install the plugin, and you can not only manage your resources from the AWS console, you can do it from within System Center and retrieve data back from CloudWatch. The other good thing to realize is that, you know what, your existing processes probably still work. They're probably still okay. But now you've got the chance to be more dynamic. Okay? You can now get data in real time. Some of that data can be used for example, keeping track of your infrastructure, because you can describe every single AWS service through an API call. Well, this is great. I don't need to maintain a big, cumbersome CMDB that's probably a month out of date if I'm lucky. Okay? I can accurately know exactly what I have running in my environment or deployed in my environment at that time. And I can pull back a bunch of data about that. Okay? This is just an example of just me describing where my instances are and information about those instances. But the cool thing is, you know what? You can actually add your own data. You can add metadata, which we call tags, to resources. So for example, I might want to tag a bunch of EC2 instances with metadata that defines the purpose. I mean, is this production, development, or test? Okay? What is the application? Which business unit does this belong to? Who's paying for it? This is all metadata that you assign with resources. And because your resources are described in real time, so is your metadata. So it doesn't go out of date. Now, you can actually use these tags, use this metadata for controlling things like permissions. But what's more interesting for me is how you can actually use it to allocate costs. This is now where you can start to do more granular showback or chargeback to your business units. The other really interesting thing, and if you've been outside today and you've seen some of the tool vendors out there, like AppDynamics, you know, they can provide you real-time dynamic views on your infrastructure. You can basically see, you know, which of my resources are busy, which of them are generating alarms. How are those resources linked together? Because remember, it's very easy to query the metadata of each of the instances and start to build a relationship between them. Okay, so where do I go next? I mean, the reality is here in this session today and in the 30 minutes that we've had, we can only scratch the surface. Well, my suggestion would be this. First of all, why don't you get lean? Why don't you test some ideas, test a hypothesis? Okay? Get out there and try and prove something that you've been itching to try. Maybe there's just a new thing that you're thinking about for your business that, you know what, I just don't have the capacity on premise, I don't have the time, I don't have the skills. Hybrid IT can help you deal with that. Okay? Because ultimately, you're trying to figure out how to deliver new business value. Perhaps part of the problem you've got is that, you know what, I have internal constraints. Well, maybe you need to move some of those resources out, put them into the cloud. Okay? Alleviate the internal constraints. That's probably going to help you stop having to buy additional hardware. So I'm going to mitigate a whole bunch of capital expenditure. Or maybe you're thinking, how can I simplify my cost structures? How can I consolidate and reduce my costs? No matter what you decide, though, remember this. If I'm working towards something in hybrid IT, I should be doing it to support a business outcome. Critical thing to remember. And finally, if you need some help getting started, there's different ways we can help you. So it's shameless plug time because I do work in the professional services org here in AWS in Singapore. If you don't have a hybrid strategy yet, or you don't quite know where to go next, come talk to us. We can help you through our cloud adoption framework, figure out a roadmap for you, figure out what the right path is for you to adopt cloud and move forward. Perhaps, you know what, you kind of know where you want to go, but you're having trouble executing on it. Well, don't worry. There are a range of AWS partners that can help you. Some of them are here today in the expo hall. So I would encourage you to go out there and talk to them and find out how they can help accelerate your hybrid journey. Finally, remember, hybrid IT is about delivering business outcomes. Thank you very much.